And we've seen attacks since 2006, but nothing has ever really exploded into what we're seeing now, and it's brought in everybody.
Now, on Israel's border with Lebanon this weekend, a reservist soldier was killed and 2 were wounded when a drone carrying explosives crashed. A second drone was intercepted by the Iron Dome defense system. Hezbollah, the militia backed by Iran, claimed responsibility for the attacks. The Israeli military's hit Lebanese positions more than 34 times since October the 7th. That's something the US has strongly discouraged. Let's speak to Zach Anders, a video journalist who's currently near the Lebanon border. Zach, we're glad to make contact with you. I realise it's a difficult place to connect with sometimes. Thank you for joining us. Just tell us about why that area is important and what has been happening there even this weekend.
Well, it's been a really steady parade of attacks from Hezbollah. I think the main context that you need to know here is that since October 7th, there have been almost daily attacks from southern Lebanon, from Hezbollah and from other factions that exist inside this space. But they did adhere to the ceasefire. When the hostage exchange was taking place, the ceasefire somewhat held here as well, even though they weren't party to the agreement. Hezbollah was not involved in the negotiations, but they adhered to it. So there was a brief pause, but since the ceasefire ended, there have been a steady parade of attacks, rocket attacks, artillery, mortar, and these ATGMs, the anti-tank guided missiles, which they're manned by personnel on the ground, and they're firing at Israeli outposts and sometimes some of the homes and villages, communities that are here in the north. We have seen Hezbollah claim that 107 Hezbollah fighters have been killed to date, so that their casualties far outweigh what the Israelis are facing. But still, you can see this exchange, this back and forth fighting, as the Israelis have losses as well. Several soldiers have been killed here in the north since October 7th, and yesterday's was a man in his 50s, a reservist, with those 2 injuries being young soldiers, young IDF soldiers that were hit by that drone that was about 2 miles from our location.
Wow. In terms of the sort of attention of the IDF, then, what is the reason for them being there when the US is really strongly sort of urging a de-escalation when it comes to Lebanon and Hezbollah, and indeed not targeting any Lebanese targets at all? So how has this region become engulfed in sort of these tensions?
Well, we could talk about that for hours and hours. I mean, this is geopolitical soup in the northern border of Israel. In southern Lebanon, just a few miles from us, is the UNIFIL forces, the United Nations interim forces for Lebanon. They're the interim forces, but they've been there since the late 70s. There are thousands of UN peacekeepers that are designed to create a buffer between northern Israel and Hezbollah, with Hezbollah supposed to be above this river, the Litani River, based on UNSC 1701, a United Nations Security Council vote from 2006, after the 2006 Lebanon War. It is somewhat held, but it's been violated so many times that no one can really say that it's been a success. The Lebanese armed forces, the LAF, are supposed to operate in this buffer in conjunction with the UN and create just space between the Israelis, the blue line, the agreed to UN border between Lebanon and Israel. But there still exists a state of war here. And we've seen attacks since 2006, but nothing has ever really exploded into what we're seeing now. And it's brought in everybody. In southern Syria, Hezbollah is operating in southern Syria as well. So the Israelis are hitting positions inside Syria. They're striking positions owned by the Syrian army. And the tension here between not only just national actors, these nation states, but between the different factions, religious factions inside southern Lebanon, is very intense and has the possibility to really explode at any moment. Hezbollah has upwards of 80,000 fighters throughout the country at its disposal that could be ready to parade down here to the southern border.
What about sort of local people, Zach? What is the kind of makeup of that region? How many people are there? And I know that many have actually been evacuated over the last few weeks.
And on the northern Israeli side are a lot of Israeli settlers that have been building communities here under fire since the 2006 war. There's been a push to get people to move up here to kind of create um, a reason for this border to be as firm as it is, this blue line, to make sure that the Israeli side has the precedence to be here, if you will. The Upper Galilee, the Golan Heights, these are areas that have been claimed. Lebanon claims this territory. Syria claims this territory. The Israelis, through conquest, through prior wars, have captured and held these areas. But it's something that, for the people that live here, they kind of understand what they're getting themselves into. They've, you talk to them, they've lived under different wars, they've been evacuated before. Upwards of 60,000 people that live in communities in the north here right now have been evacuated and are living somewhere else in Israel, southern or central Israel. And that's been their reality since October, the first week of this war, since October 7th. They're frustrated. They want to know when they're coming home. And the Israelis say, well, you won't be able to come home to these communities until we push Hezbollah north of the Litani River. That's a huge challenge diplomatically and offensively for the IDF.